Thank you. Good evening. My name is Don Gemberling. I'm going to moderate these panels this evening, panels of council candidates for the City of St. Paul upcoming races. These particular forums are being underwritten and sponsored by St. Paul Strong, which is a nonpartisan citizen group of which I am a member. And we also want to thank the good graces of the Neighborhood Network Community Cable Access TV folks who are providing all the tech support. St. Paul Strong, I have to do the part. Please turn off your phones, okay? Aha, I see people doing that. So, okay, so I did that part. St. Paul Strong is an acronym for the following letter. S is for safety, T is for trust, R is for responsible, O is for open neighborhoods and generations. We try not to take positions on issues or endorse candidates, and we don't endorse candidates, but what we're trying to do is support inclusive, transparent, and accountable public processes. Some of us have worked in those processes for a number of years, and sometimes we're kind of look askance at how the city does business, which is part of the reason why Strong came into existence. Our individual members are people who are politically active on all kinds of fronts, Republican, Democratic, Independent, and I can tell you going to Strong meetings of the board that we all have very strong opinions. It's part of the reason why we have very long meetings. But we only try as a group to advocate for transparent, open, and accountable public processes. If you want to go to our website, it's www.stpaulstrong.com, okay? We have to start with an apology. These forums are being taped for the people who are watching this on a tape version. Unfortunately, on October 8th and 9th, those dates were selected last summer, and we missed the obvious fact that that's Yom Kippur. And so that also affected some of the attendance this evening, which we'll talk about, but we do want to apologize for having done that because we know it does affect people's ability to come out. Next year, we'll try not to, or the next time we do this, we'll try not to make that mistake, okay? Again, we apologize. It wasn't intended. It just was, as they say in the world, things happen, okay? Now, part of what we did in preparing for this forums were essentially we ask all of the candidates. And I think those of folks like you who are pretty active in these things know that this is a very active year for candidates. And if I remember right, the count is 28. Somewhere I have the count. What did I do with it? Yeah, we have 28 candidates, okay? A couple of people, because of the scheduling, just can't be here. Councilman Dai Tao, kind of hard for him to be here because he's in China, okay, on a long scheduled trip, okay? And there's someone here who will speak for him shortly. Rebecca Necker, as I think most of you know, is Jewish, and she can't be here for obvious reasons, okay? And she also has somebody who will come and speak to her when we get to that particular ward in the discussions. So we invited everybody else. We have 5 incumbents who either, most of the incumbents just frankly ignored us, which we're sad about, but it's real. One of the incumbents said that they had a conflict and they just couldn't make it, okay? At least they responded, okay? One of my pet peeves in dealing with the government, and I used to work for the government, is when you talk to the government and you get nothing, you don't get a response, you don't get somebody saying, go away, you bother me, you just get nothing. And that's just not, that's not the way it should be. And nothing else is not what Mrs. Gemberling taught Donnie when he was a little boy, okay? It's not polite. So, anyway, having said enough of that, now let's start with introductions. And actually, let's ask, got too many notes here. I'd like to have Ta Fang come forward and make a statement for Councilmember Tao, and then I'll introduce the rest of the panel.
Ready when you are.
You can do it.
All right, so hello and good evening, everyone. So my name is Ta Fang, and so I'm a mother, wife, daughter. I'm also a real estate agent and a businesswoman. And you know what? I just met Dai a year ago. And actually, I was going through a health and weight loss journey, and I gave him a call one night, and I knew him through the public eye, right? But I didn't really ever get a chance to talk to him one-on-one, and I just kind of gathered all the courage and call him up one night because I wanted to talk to him about community health. And you know what? He actually picked up, and I was surprised. I was like, "What? You picked up?" I just was prepared to leave him a message. But definitely, and that's who Dai is, and he definitely has encouraged and helped develop me into the person I am today. And so, more importantly, I also serve as a volunteer for Dai Tao's council member campaign. And so, today he can't be here with us, but he did write us a letter. Okay, so I'm going to be reading from his letter. Dear friends and neighbors, thank you for coming out tonight, and thank you to those who are viewing from home. Thank you, St. Paul Strong and SPNN for hosting tonight's candidate forum. I do apologize that I cannot be there in person due to a work-related trip that has been planned for months. I feel incredibly honored to serve the hardworking, courageous, and resilient people of Ward 1. We are a community of survivors and inspiring Americans not afraid to make our city a better home for all of us. I could not be more proud to call you my friends and neighbors from all corners of the world. My friends, I am DFL, Fire and Labor Indoors, and tonight I am asking you to ring me as your #1 choice for November 5th and allow me to serve you again. After losing 2 of my sisters and a brother during the Vietnam conflict, better known as the Secret War in Laos, and after surviving the stricken refugee camps, my family made it to Minnesota. I didn't speak a lick of English, and I grew up in the dirt poor and roach and mice-infested public housing. The stripping away of my human dignity through the tragedy of war, hunger, poverty, and racism had led me to serve you. I wanted to do what I could so that you and your family don't have to experience the suffer and the pain and hurt, because your struggle is my struggle. When you elected me in 2013, I went to work right away, driving the hard bargain in City Hall, bringing City Hall to the community, and uniting us all across race and culture, gender and generations, faith and neighborhoods. Today, we created and preserved the most affordable housing options in the city to fight gentrification. Today, we leverage over $250 million in private investment to blight the Midway site and over $40 million to Black-owned and operated businesses to increase tax revenues. Today, we expand our parks, including Midway Peace Park, the new Frogtown Community Center, Frogtown Park and Farms, Jimmy Lee Play Area, and Vivi's Playground in the Boyd Park. Today, we advocated for police body cam and to remove police officers from the Police Civilian Review Commission to create trust and transparency. At the same time, we ensure our police and fire departments have the tools and resources to save lives and protect our community. Importantly, together we invested in our future by investing in our young people with quality after-school and library programs and good-paying jobs. Increase the minimum wage and protected workers with earned sick and safe time. My friends and neighbors, I believe that the quality of life for my children also depends on the quality of life for you and yours. I have a history of getting things done for you no matter how difficult. We have created so much progress for all of us. We have come so far on this journey towards racial justice. Now is not the time to hit the reset button and start all over again. Now is not the time to divide and put black, brown, and white people against each other. Now is the time to unite. Now is the time to fight for others' hopes and dreams. I am Council Member Dai Tao, and that's what I want to continue doing for you. I hope you will join us and vote Dai Tao coming as your first choice on November 5th. Thank you so much, and sincerely, Dai Tao. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Brief word about the format for the balance of the evening, and this will hold true for each of the, what we're calling the segments. After we introduce the candidates, then I'm going to be the person who asks the questions, okay? We got the questions by asking people to send us questions, so, and some of us actually did. So, and I've gone through, we got a lot more questions than we have time to work through. I've gone through and kind of prioritized them. I didn't totally prioritize them about things that I care about. For example, we're going to have some questions about TIF. As some people know, TIF drives me crazy, mostly because I'm not any good at numbers. So that's why I went to law school. So anyway, I will be asking the questions, and each candidate will have a chance to answer each of the questions. We ask that you kind of keep your answers to a couple of minutes, if at all possible. And with that, I'm going to introduce folks. To my immediate left is Akeem Bowie, or Bowie?
Anika Bowie.
Anuki, Anika.
Anika.
And I practiced.
It's all right, it's all
I
right.
really did. Anika Bowie. So, which I learned is a Mississippi name, okay? And so, you know, I was watching the Alamo the other night. Is that really bad one that John Wayne did? Oh, God. Anyway, so next to her is Liz DeLaTour. And next to her is Abu Naeem, otherwise known as the Frogtown Crusader, who, as you can probably tell, has an alternative identity in this world we live in of superheroes. And I think what I'm going to do is I ask the questions. I'm going to start with you, the first one, move down, and then the second one I'll move to Liz, and so on. Okay, that way you don't have to always be first. In the course of the candidates hearing things from one another, if you want to ask one of the other candidates a question or follow up on something, feel free to do so. Okay? Everybody straight on the format? Okay. I'll take silence as assent. Election time, as we will see for the next several months, I saw my first national political ads earlier this week. God help us. Election time is always a great time to make promises, but citizens deserve leaders who will walk their talk. Give 3 specific examples of how you will walk your particular talk, and if you don't, how citizens should hold you accountable.
So are we going to do introductions?
Oh,
Yep,
God.
yes, okay. All right.
Thank you for that.
I can lead on.
I could plead my cold, but it's probably aging forgetfulness. Each of the candidates will now introduce themselves, make a brief statement, and then we'll go forward with the questions.
Thank you. I'm glad I can help with the process. Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, already
See,
collaborating.
she already is helping.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anika Bowie, and for those who are David Bowie fans, you're welcome to also call me David Bowie, or not David Bowie, Anika Bowie. It's I come from a family of business owners, of educators, of community cooks, community activists. My family actually came from Mississippi and Texas, actually, fleeing racial trauma, racial terrorization, and coming to Minnesota 100 years ago, actually, seeking to have a safe and welcoming place to build a family and have the grandchildren that they have today and the future they hope to see. So I wear many hats. I come to this candidacy with a multidimensional experience. I am the vice president for the Minneapolis NAACP, which is the oldest civil rights organization in the nation, and it's a strong honor to have that position, especially as the youngest vice president of the Minneapolis NAACP across the nation. I'm also serve as a commissioner for the Police Civilian Internals Affair Review Commission, appointed by our Mayor Carter, where I do police oversight on community relations, public relations, and really focused on bettering our trust and our transparency with our police department. I also have the honor being organizer on behalf of the Minnesota Restore the Vote Coalition, where I lead and coordinate over 80 organizations and government agencies to help issue those who are disenfranchised on felony probation or parole their right to vote, and to advocate strongly to make sure that everyone has that sacred right to vote that many leaders before me have made possible for our community. And I'm also a former educator. I'm a proud educator of St. Paul Public Schools. After I graduated from Central, then later on Hamline University, I had the honor of really, opening and unleashing possibilities and opportunities for many of our children, also investing in their communities and empowering them to see that that government is working on their behalf, and that, you know, empowering them on challenging and holding accountable our government, as well as seeing the positive influence of them working on issues. My priority that I am bringing to my governance as a city council member is to make sure that we have a strengthened collaboration with community as well as government. I'm also a consultant and have done several projects with our Ramsey County, Hennepin County, and Dakota County, and have really partnered with our mayor to make sure that he's lobbying on behalf of getting the resources to Ward 1 and resources to all of St. Paul. And it would be an amazing honor to move forward, you know, certain issues and helping us troubleshoot processes and coming together on so many issues that presented themselves. I'm sure we're going to be talking about trash. I'm sure we're going to be talking about TIF dollars and how our tax dollars are actually working for us. And also what's really near and dear to me as a daughter of a community grocery store owner, how we can build on economic development, and we can, you know, create pathways for the residents in Ward 1 to find themselves on a pathway out of poverty and onto a pathway of education and raising their families and investing into our tax base and really seeing their tax dollars work for them. It would be an honor to serve you as a city council member. I think we're at a time right now, at the right time in the right place, to where, you know, we can't vote out Trump in 2019, but we can change the face of, you know, our future here in St. Paul. We can change the narrative and change the leadership with someone who is willing to have a new approach to governance that is holistic, that's transparent, that's honest, and also community-centered. And I, you know, hope to be that for you, and I'm also willing to, you know, share how we can start now and not wait till November 5th for the clock to start ticking on doing this development and making sure that we are building a truly strong St. Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz?
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Liz Alatorre. It actually means from the Watchtower, since we were talking about that earlier. I'm a first-generation American. I'm the proud daughter of Mexican immigrants who immigrated to the United States in 1984, and actually were naturalized during the Reagan administration's policies. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. I'm a renter. I'm a community organizer. I spent a lot of time in the past organizing on issues, and I actually worked for Congresswoman McCollum for 5 years previous to the work that I do now. And I'm an advocate. That's what I've been doing for quite some time, whether it's on the campaign trail or on issues. It's something that I'm really passionate about. But I'm running because I really think that we need to put individuals like you and me back at the center of decision making at City Hall. One of the biggest things that motivated me to run for office was really what I felt was the pretty deep lack of transparency on just a variety of issues. And for myself, being as well connected as I am, as politically involved as I was, as knowledgeable and able to find the answers on my own, I wasn't really finding them. And as I began to think about what are the kinds of things that we look for in elected officials, I think that's one of the first things that we really need to know. So for me, that's one of the biggest motivators to run. I currently serve actually with St. Paul Ramsey County Public Health, and I work within the Healthy Communities Division with a program called SOS Sexual Violence Services. We've been in the space of providing advocacy services for the last 43 years, and I was brought in as the agency's first systems advocate. So my job is really to figure out how all the systems that interact with victim survivors and figure out how they work and how they don't work. And that included law enforcement. That included navigating, some of the issues with prosecution, specifically the county attorney's office. That included, making sure that victims were empowered with information. My job was never to make decisions for them or advise them on them, but rather present the choices and support in whatever decision is made. And so in that work that I've done, that's really put me on the forefront, I believe, of some of the most critical issues at our city level. And that's what's fed into my priorities that I intend to start the minute I get elected, and that starts with affordable housing. We talk a lot about density, we talk a lot about upzoning, we talk a lot about apartments and how are we defining affordable housing, but what we're leaving behind are those folks that are the most vulnerable in our communities, people who have been homeless for such a long time. And that's why I'm really adamant about making sure that we're putting forward some energy at the city level with emergency housing and transitional housing as well. If we're not able to give people those steps to transition out of poverty, transition out of despair, and into healthy, productive lives, we're not going to do that by simply offering them a job and an apartment, but no other supports. So I believe that that's something that has to be included in our conversation. And I really think that a lot of it is the city partnering with other public agencies and private entities as well. The other thing that I've gotten to work on quite a bit in my role has been police accountability. I've built relationships over the last 3 years with St. Paul Police Department, the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office, and the other jurisdictions within Ramsey County. And one thing that I've learned is that it's the job of a police officer is not easy, and that the vast majority of officers do want to do the right thing, and have that, that need to serve. And so what I did first and foremost was jump in head first and get to know those systems. I put myself through the civilian academy. I've put myself through college courses and started the process of getting a law enforcement certification. And that's made me just really aware of the nuances of public safety and the nuances of not just the issue at hand, but how do you change systems if you don't understand them? And I feel like that's something that's really missing at our city level. If we're just talking about rhetoric and we're just giving you answers that you want to hear as voters, we're not doing ourselves any favor. We're not doing our communities any favor, and it's really not going to last. It's not going to result in any change in policy or, or better outcomes. So I'm really excited to get to work. I'm really excited to work on the issues that are within my purview as city council member. And I think that's where our focus needs to be. And I think that that's exactly what we need to demand of our elected leaders, that rather than having talking points about other levels of government or just what you want to hear, demand those answers. And I think even if we disagree on any one issue, you're going to know where I stand. And I think that that's going to be a drastic improvement on the current leadership we have in this ward. And I think we can work through that discomfort, and I think that's how you really build trust, and that's how you make change. And that's certainly what we've done as advocates with law enforcement and with the criminal justice system. And there's really no reason we can't use that same approach in our everyday city governance. So I look
Liz.
forward to talking to you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Abu?
Hello, can you hear me? All right. So my name is Abu Naeem, and I'm a Bangladeshi citizen. So like I was born in Dhaka, Bangladesh. I came to America when I was 2 years old by the Diversity Visa Lottery Program. We're raised in New York City, and my parents grew up in poverty and blue-collar jobs. And I have a master's of science in agricultural resource economics in UC Berkeley. And I'm a former education data analyst for South Washington County Schools. And I'm currently the founder and programmer of the St. Paul Open Data Initiative. And the initiative is essentially taking public data from different sources, so mostly from St. Paul municipalities and departments, taking that information and then creating reports, interactive reports to engage the public. So for example, right now I actually took the voting data from the Minnesota voting records and showed that there's systemic inequities within our voting systems. So for example, from the last, from 2015 city council election, from the age group of 18 to 20-year-olds, only around 1% voted from the age group of 18 to 20-year-olds. So this shows that within our city, to young people, they don't really value why local elections sort of matter. And so one of the things that I'm running, one of my motivations for running is to really empower disenfranchised community members. So one of the things I've noticed when I did some community organizing around safety is when I knocked on doors, I've noticed that many residents did not even know that our government even do things, or they got disillusioned by the process of our local systems. And when I talk to our elected officials, city council members, why is the case that people of color, disenfranchised members, why are they not participating? They use poverty as an excuse. And I am frustrated with that. It creates a cyclical thinking where we're actually kind of like babying people without giving them the opportunity for them to really empower themselves and get their voice heard. So this is why I'm running. And one key thing I'm trying to, so there's two issues that I'm trying to I'll be focusing on. One is citizen engagement. And the question I ask is, right now we live in the technological age, digital age. Why are we using technology of 200 years ago to try to connect with people right now? So this is where, if you think of a town hall or being physically present to a place to be engaged, there's so many different tools that are available to do authentic engagement that really can help people who are busy with a multitude of jobs, but also for childcare or anything of that sort, they can be engaged while taking care of their child at the same time. So
Okay.
these are,
Thank you.
okay.
So, okay. Now, questions? Pardon me? I understand that, okay? And I think we'll be okay.
Yeah,
So-
I'm totally fine with that. I
so-
can go on and on.
So let's go to the questions. And I won't ask the one I ask out of turn. The term transparency is much in vogue these days, okay? Each of you briefly tell me what the term transparency actually means to you. And yeah, you get to start.
Okay, wonderful. That's an incredible question, especially in the sense of where we're at right now and how, our views and how our connections and like Liz De La Torres had mentioned, how savvy we are connected to our government. So the state of Ward 1 is very complex of those who have, been very comfortable and confident with interacting with our representatives, and there also are constituents who are totally out of the process and kind of disillusioned on like how government works. I think transparency for me really is connected to being, having the ability to educate and also inform and being able to connect people to what really matters and the values of, why they should be engaged in the process, why they should show up, and why they should even care. Transparency for me is putting the pieces into play and like making it adaptable for folks to truly understand. I'm someone who is really, really value making sure that we don't have invisible labor. City council is a very thankless job, and I seek to govern to where I am always sharing and being transparent and being communicative around what we are doing and the decisions that are being made, as well as how community can come in and best support the work that we're doing on the city council level. So I will be brief, and I appreciate that. And I also want to be transparent in the sense that I have to leave early. I actually, my campaign team is hosting a fundraiser for me at this very moment. But I was, really honored to be here and at least, share my vision as well as listen to, the questions and concerns that you may have.
Okay. Liz,
Yes, so
what does transparency, what does that word mean to you?
that word is one of the biggest reasons I got into this race. What transparency means from an elected official and a candidate specifically is when you've made up your mind, the folks in the community know what it is, regardless of what that is, right? And having the open dialogue about why you feel that way or why you're supporting a certain issue, and also allowing people who don't agree with you to have that conversation and not shut them out entirely. I think that's something that's really missing in our local politics. It's certainly missing at the federal level. And that's something that I'm really committed to. It's, like I said before, it's how we make real sustainable change. And for a while, we've been, letting our politics get the best of us and letting our politics kind of dictate, how we communicate with each other. And that's certainly not a way to govern. Another thing that I think specifically leads to my commitment to transparency is to be really honest about the issues that I have a purview over and those that I don't. And I think we see a lot of candidates that run on platforms that are focused at the federal level or are focused on just issues that are, more attractive and such as healthcare and things like that. And so that's just, we don't do ourselves any justice if we don't speak to the issues at hand. So.
Okay. Abu?
All right, so transparency. So one of the reasons I founded the Open Data Initiative is for transparency of our system. So I'll give an example. For example, crime data. So often there's crime statistics saying that certain, like an area or a grid, that crime went down, but if you actually look at the data and de-aggregate it, you can see there's localized effects where there's some aspects, certain blocks where there's actually an increase in crime rather than a decrease in crime. So this is a perfect example where using data as a form of transparency to see what's actually happening. So what happens where, I think transparency is a very important question because it's kind of the question of how much can we really trust the government? I know this is weird because I'm running for office, but one key thing where I'm trying to focus on is to give power to the people. To give power to the people and can play around with the data to see what's actually happening rather than trusting certain institutions. And I could give you a bunch of examples of that. But regarding to leadership, I think transparency is looking how can you make the process of making decisions and really involve everyone in that process. And this is not just a listening session. It involves of actually educating people before they go to the listening session. So what's the point of a listening session if you don't know what's going on? If you have no knowledge, no nothing, you're pretty much kind of like a sheep, being carried forward to go a certain direction. So my goal is really educate people to understand how data works, understand the processes, so that way they can participate fully, and also they can communicate with each other without shouting matches. And the last thing I would say that I also signed the Pro-Truth Pledge. So this focuses on looking at facts, looking at data, but also to admit when you're wrong. So one key thing that we don't see with our politicians, no offense to anyone, but they don't admit when they're wrong. If you're not able to admit when you're wrong, then you create distrust. So one key thing in transparency is not just having data out there, but to admit your mistakes and you learn from them. And I am here, I will admit, I'm human, and I will make mistakes here and there, but I'm here to learn, I'm here to be, so that's where some aspects of transparency. And I would say probably the last part of transparency would be, I would say, related to the institution. So like one key thing is that power should be distributed to others. So how can we, I would say, the knowledge, community knowledge, is available to many community members rather than one, couple of people. Because often we just rely on experts. There should be community experts. So I think that's where part of transparency is, to build the infrastructure and knowledge, community knowledge, to really hold both our community and our leaders accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. We got 5 minutes left or less. If you were on the city council when the garbage contract was negotiated, how would you have done things differently? And we'll start with Abu.
So I'm the only city council member that's voting for no for the referendum, and so I just want to make that clear of the city council candidates. But how would I do differently is, one is there was certain feedback that's gotten from the residents. So from that feedback, it doesn't seem like the city council, when they made their contract, was actually listening to that feedback. So my key focus is, if I'm going to work for the organized trash, is focusing on equity and also environmental behavior. So for example, the opportunity for opting out, by not allowing households to sort of opt out, it sort of impacts the affordable housing, like it impacts the cost of rent, because in a multi-residential household, they have to spend a separate bin for each one of them. So this increases the rent. And second is, because you cannot opt out from getting a bin, then you're forced to, you can't share with others, so you're forced to consume a lot more. So there's no incentive to actually reduce your waste. So those are two important behaviors that I consider very important. And also in the city, we always talk about affordable housing, and this is a clear failure of that. So this is where, and also last thing is that when there was a lawsuit that occurred with Judge Castro, this was the perfect opportunity to renegotiate and get those features in our new bill. And in fact, I wrote a letter to Mayor Carter explaining that there was an opportunity to make this organized trash collection process even more better than it was before. And he could have taken that opportunity, but he decided to double down. And I think this is where a lack of transparency, if you want to say, is a perfect example of that.
Thank you. Liz?
Yes, so this is an issue I've dug into quite a bit. And one thing, regardless of, how we're voting on the referendum, and just to make it clear, I am voting yes. But one of the things that really boggled me throughout the entire process was, how did the city enter a legally binding agreement 8 months before it went up for approval at the city council? And that just stinks to me. That kind of just reeks of either incompetence or, complete lack of oversight. And you think about these big institutions and local governments. I mean, I work for Ramsey County. There's lots of bureaucracy, and not just processes and procedures and, rules, but there's also a lot of people that things have to go through. So I really wonder, at what point in our process did either one person or a lot of people miss the fact that we're bringing this issue to the city council when it's already been decided. That's the one thing I can't really seem to get over. And I really do believe that someone's got to be held accountable. And if it's not our elected leaders, then someone got bad advice at the city attorney's office, at Public Works. And so I would like to see some accountability on that issue, and really to, have a discussion on how that was, not the way to go, and admit that city leaders were wrong, and go back to that. But I think another thing too, and hindsight is always 20/20, but it's pretty clear that if the city was going to get into the business of collecting our garbage, then they definitely should have gone with the RFP as opposed to the small consortium of haulers. That would have definitely lowered our price and made them probably more comparable to those over in Maplewood, which often get compared to the rates we pay now. Yeah.
Okay. And we're out of time. Go ahead. Oh, quick close.
Oh, all right.
And this time I'm going to hold you to a minute. Okay?
All right, so I would say my key focus is about empowering community members. So this is where my big vision is, I didn't mention community safety. So community safety is another issue that I think is the forefront for Ward 1, because if we're trying to sort of combat, I would say, gentrification, so often when we're trying to improve a community, we sort of focus on investment. So that's usually, that investment is long-term investment to improve a community, but those long-term investments are usually enjoyed by folks that move into the community as a result of gentrification. And one of the things with gentrification is it occurs where, so right now there's a spike in crime, and if our community does not do proactive action toward it, it makes it unsafe. There's a lot of trauma associated with the community, and many residents leave the space. That leaves it open for new members to come in. And up to that point, then there's going to be increased police force there, and it will be slowly become gentrified. I've seen this in New York City, San Francisco. This happened in many progressive cities as well. So this is a progressive city, but we can actually learn from the past and try to avoid it, and not just avoid it, to sort of correct for it. And the best way for correction is to make sure that the community members within Ward 1 stay there, because we make it safe, because we build a community, build relationships that they don't want to leave. So this is where I sort of advocate for short-term community solutions, and this involves getting to know your neighbors, block clubs, and really addressing, I would say, the root cause of crime and poverty. Thank you.
And Liz, you get to wrap it up.
Thank you. It's a really brief conversation, and so I'm really glad to have been here and to at least touch upon a couple of the things that I plan to prioritize as your next city council member. And I hope that those takeaways are really mostly about transparency and accountability. Again, it's we haven't had a huge, robust discussion on issues, and we could probably be here for the rest of the night just simply doing that. But I really do believe that the collective power of our community can transform the way that we interact with our elected officials. And if we don't have that, there's no way we can build trust with those that represent us. I don't bring a campaign full of slogans and sound bites and rhetoric. What I'm ready to do is to roll my sleeves up and get to work and have conversations with people on all sides of the issue to come to some sort of agreement about how we're going to move our city forward. And that's going to be a really tough conversation to have, because if we're not bringing in revenue, we're not going to be able to do all the things that we want to do. And in this climate specifically, if we're going to have something, we're likely looking at cuts elsewhere. So I really want to work on the issues that are within my purview, the issues that affect the majority of us, and really get back to those bread and butter issues of fixing our roads, or making sure that people and businesses have the infrastructure to get to and from work, that we're building better coalitions with our public schools and strengthening our tax base, and working with police departments to have better outcomes and build more trust and accountability into our communities and in our interactions. So thank you very much for your time. It's great to be here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, as we mentioned earlier, Rebecca Necker can't be here tonight for obvious reasons. However, she sent Bill Alton, Brian Alton. John, you called him Bill. And he's going to speak for Rebecca. Go ahead, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Brian Alton, and I am a resident of Ward 2 and a supporter of Councilmember Naker. I have been asked by her to read her statement. Thank you for the invitation to attend today's forum. I would have very much liked to be here, but I am unable to attend tonight because I'm observing Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year in my Jewish faith tradition. I appreciate the opportunity to have this statement read for me instead. I'm running for re-election to the City Council because I believe in the power of local government to make a difference in people's lives and to fight back against the inequities that hold us back as a society. All my life, I have worked to make sure that those who work hard have the opportunity to advance and be fulfilled. My experience serving on the City Council over the last 4 years has helped me understand the workings of city government, build the necessary relationships to get things done, and understand how to translate constituents' needs into policy action. In my first term, I was proud to launch the Open for Business program to support small businesses in St. Paul, raise the minimum wage, and ensure all workers have paid sick leave, and support emergency shelter and affordable housing projects throughout my ward. I make it a priority to be accessible and responsive to my constituents, holding regular Facebook chats, community coffees, and happy hours. If I am reelected, my top priorities will be to ensure all St. Paul families have access to high-quality, affordable childcare, to support local business owners, to build more affordable housing, and to restore the council's ability to hold city departments accountable for effective performance. I will also continue to focus on providing excellent constituent services. Thank you again for the opportunity to read this statement, and I look forward to connecting with each of you over the next several weeks. Thank you very much. Sincerely, Rebecca Naker.
Thank you, Brian. So, one of the candidates who indicated they might be here for Ward 2 was Helen Myers, and I guess she couldn't make it for whatever reason. She's not out there, is she? No, okay. So, we have 2 remaining candidates. I'm reminded by the organizers that we really do need to do a little better job of staying on time. So I'm a recovering rigid German, and I'm trying to think of some decent way to remind you you're taking too much time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this hand out here, and I'm not going to pound it. I'm just going to put it out gently. So with that kind of new instruction, and I should have done it before, and I apologize that you're my guinea pigs. Why don't we start with? What does it mean when you put your hand out? It means time to wrap up. Take somebody from New York to remind me of these things. So we all sort of know each other. Okay, so I think we'll just, format's the same. You get 2 minutes to give an opening statement, expand on my introduction. Then after that, we'll go to the questions, okay? And we'll start with Lindsay Ferris Martin, next to me.
All right, I'm Lindsay Ferris Martin, and first and foremost, thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate it, and thank you for all the good work that you do at St. Paul Strong. I'm happy to share my opinions and insight today, but make no mistake that my neighbor's voice will carry me through this process of a city council person, and I will always be considering how this will, any policies that come my way or any decisions I have to make, I will constantly be asking myself, how will this benefit my community? How will this benefit my neighbors? I'm a small business advocate and a social media consultant. What I do on a day-to-day basis is engage my small businesses with their community organically to help them market their business and really support their community so that way their neighbors will have an affinity for who they are. It's a working relationship back and forth. This is my daily job 24/7, as is social media. I have an innate passion to make a difference and a sincere passion for my neighbors. I get that from my grandparents that I spent my summers with. I watched them do amazing things within their communities and support their neighbors, and has driven me to be the person that I am today. I'm humbled to be endorsed by the Veterans Party of Minnesota. It is a nonpartisan organization that, like those who serve and stand strong, I will work hard to uphold the integrity of our Constitution and our city's charter. I am running to uplift my neighbor's voice with action, no matter your political affiliations, and do meaningful work with accountability and transparency, representing the majority and not just the select few or personal agendas.
Thank you. Bill Hausko. Hasko.
I'm happy to be here this evening. I would like to ask you something. In recent years, has your quality of life improved markedly under your current city council? Or is it time for a change, a big change at City Hall? If so, I am your best bet for true change in Ward 2. While there is much good that is occurring throughout this ward, at the same time, there remains significant neglect and many issues that are not being addressed well at all, including out-of-control spending priorities, which result in out-of-control property, fee, and assessment taxation. It is harming many, many people, not only homeowners, but countless renters as well. Crime is increasing, and too much of it goes unreported. Too often, community outreach efforts by the city are disingenuous. This trash ordinance debacle, planning for light rail / streetcars on West 7th Street, and planning for Pedro Park are just 3 examples. Additionally, I've lost count of how many good people have told me, as I've lit dropped every corner of this ward once, and as I'm now doing a second time, that their emails and phone calls to our incumbent's office have not been returned. And let's not talk about canceling your July 4th fireworks. Good grief. Again, I'm very happy to be here this evening, and I will do my best to answer your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the things that some of us worry about in our fair city is that too often the city gets sued. And too often people who sue get fairly substantial judgments against the city. And of course, judgments against the city are actually judgments against us, the taxpayers. And, you know, some examples, the Black Bear Crossing debacle, police brutality things, the current trash collection thing, which is generating lots of legal fees. And so, in your role as a council person, what do you think can be done to eliminate or reduce those kinds of lawsuits? And why don't we start with Bill this time? And again, try and keep it to a couple of minutes if possible.
Okay. You know, I don't know, there's things in front of us that the city just, they ignore, you know, these potential liability issues. I'm going to give you 2 that have been on my mind. The scooters, I think we have a love-hate relationship with the scooters in this city. That's a liability for the city waiting to happen, in my estimation. I mean, there's a sign on those scooters, do not ride them on the sidewalks. And they're countless times I've seen them on the sidewalks. And I was walking down on Kellogg Boulevard, coming up Sibley Street from the riverfront, and Custom House, it's a new development in the old post office building. And I was just walking past that building, and if I'd been 2 seconds quicker, a man on a scooter going like a bat out of you-know-what down Kellogg on the sidewalk would have hit me. Now, I would have been quite upset, and I would have been seriously injured because he was going so fast. That's a suit for the city waiting to happen. Another one is the Jackson Street bike path. They spent $15 million of our dollars putting in a bike path, which is great. I'm a biker, and well, not recently because somebody stole my bike, but that's another subject. Okay, good. So, if you walk, you know, my business is on the corner of 7th Street and Jackson, right in the middle of downtown St. Paul, next to this bike path. And I think it was 2 years ago I contacted Councilmember Neeker and then Chris Coleman, and since Mayor Carter. Cars, I'm going to give you a little long-winded answer. This is just amazing, and it's a liability for the city waiting to happen. Cars coming down East 7th Street, heading west, and they hit Jackson. Those making a left-hand turn, if they make a right-hand turn, Jackson's a 2-way at that point. But if you make a left-hand turn, it's a 1-way. But a lot of people don't know that. And because the bike path is there, and they put landscaping between the bike path and the actual traffic lanes, I have honestly watched 250 cars take a left there and go down the bike path. I have written the city several times at length, in June particularly, to our incumbent and the mayor saying, this is a massive liability for the city waiting to happen. It's not a matter of if somebody gets hit, but when. They're going to be seriously injured and or killed. And so as a representative, I'll be aware of these things, and I want people to share these concerns with me. And so those are 2 ways to just change things. And why the mayor and incumbent Rebecca Neeker don't want to address this, I said, just put out a bollard. There's bollards, that's a tube that can be attached to the pavement. There's other bollards elsewhere on this path, and they won't do one in the spot that hundreds of cars are driving down the bike path.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
And you get like 3+ minutes, at least.
And you know what? Feel free just to be like,
So,
But
No
my
need to be
opening
shy.
was short.
good point.
some ways to avoid lawsuits. Again, my initial statement talks about the integrity of our city's charter and our state constitutions. If we leverage those in our decision makings, it'll propel us to do the right thing from the beginning. Personal agendas often get in the way and muddy our constitutions and our charter. Sometimes our city council and our leaders feel that maybe the charter is just there for, I don't know, looks or appearance, and feel that they can move their way around the city charter or the Constitution. But if we hold it to its integrity, we'll be in the right. Also, if our intentions are good and for the benefit of the majority of our community, that will lead us down the right path all the time. We also need to make sure that we are taking personal agendas out, that we're engaging properly to begin with on major decisions with our neighbors, with our residents, with our communities, and with the businesses, and whoever is being affected by whatever decisions we're making. And then also to properly enforce our ordinances when necessary.
Thank you. Let's try something a little different. In your ward, what do you think are the 3 most pressing issues that you'd like to address as a council person?
Is it my turn
That's your
first?
turn.
I'm sorry. Sorry. 3 pressing issues in our ward have to be public safety, taxes, and in leveraging our neighbors' voices in our community. Crime in public safety looks different in Ward 2 depending on which neighborhood you're in. For example, crime in the Western District, which covers Summit Hill, you may see more home, car, and theft burglary. The same crimes are trending off of West 7th and Little Bohemia and off of Fort Road area. Some businesses are experiencing armed robbery. The West Side is not without gang activity, drug overdoses, persons in crisis, mental health issues, home, car, and bike theft. Additionally, drive-by shootings and gun violence have continued to be an issue on the West Side as well. Lower Town and Downtown see drug overdoses, open-air drug exchanges and use, mental health crisis, persons in crisis, skyway, safety issues, bike theft and person-to-person theft, public defecation and urination, and much more. Some may feel in their area crime isn't a big deal, but for some of our neighbors just less than a mile away, it's a huge deal and could be life-threatening. Because some of us don't see it as vividly as others, it doesn't mean that we don't have serious issues, and we need to make sure that we have resources in place to help all of our neighbors across the board, not what's just happening on our block. Also, when it comes to our taxes, a lot of us in Ward 2 are wondering what the hell has been going on. You know, there is a veil right now over our eyes, and people are wondering, why are we seeing an increase taxes, but where are our services? They don't match. People can say, well, the budget is open for you to see, but we know that parts of our public funds and our general funds are being diverted elsewhere, but how much? And is that playing a factor in our public safety? Is it playing a factor in our road maintenance? Those are some of the things. Is that my 3 minutes?
Yep.
Okay, sorry.
So,
Bang, louder.
Bill, what do you think are the 3 most important issues facing the ward?
It's really hard to rein in down to 3 because there's so many.
Do your top 3 as opposed to your top 10. So,
I think property tax increases, fee increases, assessments, second to trash. That's as I've dropped this whole war, that's the second most prevalent thing that people bring up. What I proposed is that the citizens have a right to vote on proposed taxes and fees and assessment increases. All of you have the right currently to vote on school levy increases. So would it be that hard to apply it to city taxation? Second thing would be crime. A basic thing that I think is very much needed is a citywide crime map. If you go to the city's website currently, at the top there's a link for maps, and it says it's maps for recreation, trails, transit, a variety of things. They're all wonderful. What there should also be there is a map of crime in this city. And you click it on, it's the entire city, beginning of January to January, December 31st of each year. As a crime is reported, a color-coded dot goes onto that map with type of crime and where it happened. Every time a crime report is filed each day, more dots are added to that map. There's nothing to be ashamed of knowing what is happening in this city. There is too much crime, but you need to know what's actually happening, and you should not have to dig for it in district maps, etc. The Skyway system in downtown St. Paul, this is attached to crime, it often feels unsafe for people. There needs to be a Skyway system-wide camera with audio system with call boxes. So anywhere within that system, if you feel unsafe, you push that button and a live person will come on, Skyway Security, may I help you? And they can dispatch help to you, in short notice. The suppression of crime statistics, I've heard this from police officers. Crimes, unless you're being touched, don't write a report. And that needs to change. And I think that's one of the reasons why crime is increasing in this city. There's this permissive attitude that certain lower level crimes are okay and nothing's gonna happen to you. So it's just building. Third one really quick, City Hall interaction. When you send what I would like to see is when you send an email communication to City Hall via the city's website in the future, you can hit direct or public. Public means if you say public, everybody can read what you've sent. And the city's going to, I think the whole, again, so many people say they don't hear back from City Hall when they've communicated. That needs to change, and it will change if I'm elected. I could go on, but I'll stop. Thank you.
You both mentioned property taxes going up. What are some ways you think we can get them under control? Are there specific things you think that we ought to target on to help reduce city expenditures? And I think, Bill, you get to go first.
I'll be honest, I'm not prepared to say what should be cut necessarily within the budget. If I'm elected, the 2021 budget, I want to hear back from you what you think is unessential spending versus what is essential spending. I will say one that I think we could, maybe a lot of us are in agreement on, is the mayor's staff seems to be rather robust, and we could probably do with half the people in there, and the city would get along just fine. Sales tax is a voluntary tax, and the city could be doing much, much better than it is attracting people to the city to spend discretionary income. And I could give you a list of things what could happen, but I just promise you if I'm elected, they will.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Well, my last comment kind of touched on it. Where are some of our general funds going is a huge part of it. And if we can understand where some of our general funds are going, and into TIF buckets or whatever else and how much is going, that may allow for other opportunities for our budget to be opened up or maybe even reduced. What I find interesting in this year's budget is some glaring things. And that is that the mayor and city promoted that they engaged 200 residents of a population of 307,000. So about 0.00649% of our population were engaged in conversations about values and priorities on our budget. 59% of those people, 200, which means about 118 of your neighbors, said that they would support property tax increases for two reasons: affordable housing and mental health resources. Yet, reducing our St. Paul Police Department budget handles a good portion of our mental health calls, and that budget was being reduced. So that's a glaring question. Along with $250,000 from the St. Paul Police Department, mental health budget was actually given away, given back to the mayor. He gave it to the fire department, and they weren't sure what to do with it. The other side of the budget is redundancies. Right? So there's a portion of our city budget where we are funding a business service, a service that was put into place to educate business owners about minimum wage and also the sick and leave ordinance. As some of you know, the city is currently facing a lawsuit regarding their own ordinance. And so now they're putting together a task force to educate business owners. This is a business service, and the businesses are actually already being taxed for this service, but the residents are also being taxed for this service, and you have to wonder why. That's one area. So looking through the budget and looking through redundancies, whether it's staffing redundancies, as Bill hit on, or whether it's these special committee redundancies or what have you, there's room in our budget for things to be edited out and realigned.
Thank you. Back to a question, which is actually my favorite question, but anyway. So, first of all, what does the term transparency mean to you as a value, for lack of a better word? And you get to start this time, so.
Thank you. I just have to write words down so I don't forget to say
Nope, I
them.
understand.
Transparency to me actually has two other words that are a part of the definition, and that's responsibility and accountability. If we're going to be transparent in what we do, we have to be accountable. We also have to be thoughtful in what we do, and we have to hold ourselves responsible. Transparency means that what we're about to do or something that we're going to do or whatever is in front of us makes sense, it's thoughtful, and then we can be held responsible if need be. Transparency in city has a lot of issues. It can bring up conspiracy theories. It can bring up heated debates. You know, he said, she said, or what have you. There is a huge need for transparency in city leadership. And I think, too, when we remove personal agendas or party affiliation at the city level, we open up the door for transparency because there will be more thoughtfulness and if there's responsibility built into it and accountability.
Thanks. Bill? Same question. What does transparency mean to you, particularly as a value?
Well, three examples that haven't been transparent is about the trash issue, streetcars planning on West 7th Street, and the Pedro Park planning for downtown St. Paul. I don't know if any of you are aware of that. It's just a fiasco. And streetcars are a close second. Actually, I mean, it's all really bad. And then the trash. If any of you want, send Michael an email. He's helped me with my campaign, info@hoscoforward2.org, and I will send you 50 pages, an email thread between me, Councilmember Rebecca, Mayor Chris Coleman, Mayor Carter, about Pedro Park. You will shake your head when you read that. And getting back to, I'm going to be a little redundant here. Earlier I talked about the city's website needs to be upgraded. Getting back to transparency. When you send a communication to the city, if you hit public, everybody's going to see it. How many of you been online and did a thumbs up or a thumbs down on an article? Put up your hand. You ever done that? Okay. And you've also have the opportunity to post comments relating to what you're just reading. A lot of the miscommunication that I witnessed personally for years, and a lot of you have witnessed in this room for a variety of other issues, will just evaporate if the city's website is changed, as I've suggested, and will happen if I'm elected. Thank you.
Thank you. There's discussion that we ought to give whoever develops the Ford site maybe up to $115 million in TIF funding. Starting with Bill, yeah. Number one, what do you think of that idea? And if we do that, what sense do you have, what impact that has on other programs in the city? So it's actually a two-part question. And we're getting down in time. I've gotten the 10-minute high sign, just so you know. So, Bill?
Well, I mean, the Ford site is one of the most remarkable developable sites in America right now. And I don't know that there should be any TIF money involved with its redevelopment. I mean, developers will come forward and do something there. I'm shocked. I didn't know that it was this high. So I don't know why they're offering $115 million. And regarding the Ford site, I'm going to go back a little bit. Going back to streetcars on West 7th, I was one of the early ones going back years ago is use the Canadian Pacific Railroad spur line to get light rail through the West 7th area without it running down West 7th Street, which is going to remove all of the on-street parking, probably put dozens upon dozens of businesses out of business. And that spur line, it would start at Union Depot, West Publishing site, which is another remarkable piece of property that the county is prepared to give $80 million public dollars to help see its redevelopment just boggles the mind. Again, that's a fantastic piece of riverfront site, and so that. But anyway, the spur line, I would argue, could suffice quite well for a light rail line to the airport, and it would go through the Ford plant site, which would escalate its value even more and make it even more attractive to developers. And so there would be no need to have a subsidy from the taxpayers for that site. And you had it was a two-part question. What was it?
How are we doing for time? Got 5 minutes. Okay. Why don't we go to Lindsay? What do you think of TIF money for the Ford site?
You said 115, correct?
That's what I'm told.
Another report said 107, but regardless, it makes me wonder how much of our general fund is in the TIF fund. How big is that piece of pie? For people who don't know, TIF money is our general fund. We're taxed for it. It's our general fund that is then moved to this other lot for development. People, when we talk about transparency, this is where it comes into play here. Most people don't understand that it's our tax dollars that could have been used elsewhere towards schools, our roads, public safety, which is an issue, or other city basic needs. And right now, St. Paul is struggling when it comes to our basic needs. Does the Ford plant need our development money, our TIF money? Do they need it so much that we're willing to risk educational programs, or that we're willing to put our neighbors at risk for drive-by shootings? Additionally, there haven't been studies done necessarily in St. Paul that have proven economic development has occurred using our TIF dollars.
Okay.
Outside of what would happen naturally. Sorry.
Thank you. Couple of minutes each, I think, for closing statements. You got to start, so we'll give Bill the opening of the closing statements. So go ahead, Bill. A couple of minutes.
First, I would like to thank St. Paul Strong and St. Paul Neighborhood Network for making tonight's event possible. I think it's. Secondly, and most importantly of all, I would like to thank those in attendance and even those at home who will be viewing this event later for being here and for taking an interest in these important races. I'm applying for a job, ladies and gentlemen, although I'm quite happily self-employed right now, a job to work for and represent at City Hall citizens of Ward 2. Really quick, how many of you are from Ward 2? Yay, that's great. That's great. And I will serve you to the very best of my abilities if you hire me. I promise that things will change for the better, much better, in this ward and in this city. And hopefully on our journey, there will be more new faces representing other wards as well. Together we can restore St. Paul's luster, and together we can improve your quality of life here. We can. I do hope to be working for you come this January 2020, and I mean that. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindsay.
So some of you might wonder why I decided to run for city council. In June of this year, I was interviewing my third real estate agent and considering to put my house on the market. I would have been the 11th neighbor between April and June of this year to leave the west side. We were victimized by a problem property that had drive-by shootings, stabbings, and open-air drug use, feet in front of a school and a playground. Our neighbors fought tirelessly 24/7, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, calling the police and working with the police department for 10 months straight with little to no response from our city council, our mayor, and not just one city council member, but several. We ended up losing 10 of our neighbors who gave up. They couldn't do it anymore. They left. Collectively, these neighbors had spent over 250 years on the west side, and they are gone. It was hard. I told you earlier that I have a passion for my neighbors and I have a passion for my community. Watching them leave because they were frustrated and scared was horrible. On top of that, we had the trash issues and we have tax issues and we have basic need issues. And we weren't alone. So I hope to earn your votes so that we can experience the difference in City Council services through someone who considers it an honor and a gift to be a public servant and a representative.
Thank you. Thank you both. Anyway, we have two more wonderful candidates. One for Ward 3, Patty Hartman. One for Ward 4, Terrence Robertson Bayless. I think we'll start introductions with Terrence, and please hold it to a couple of minutes.
Sure. Thank you, SPNN. Again, I was just here a couple nights ago. This is like my third debate in a week. Well, not a debate forum. So I feel like I live here now. So this is wonderful. But most importantly, to all the residents, it's amazing to see so many people turn up. And it just shows just how much people are really paying attention. So a little bit about me. I grew up on Minnesota's Iron Range. And at a young age, the age of 21, I found myself struggling with drug addiction. I was homeless, living out of my car until my car was repossessed, and I was in and out of jail. And this is something that I talk very openly and candidly about because it's part of my journey and it's part of my story. And I knew at a very young age that something had to change, or there was a very good possibility that I could die. And it was then that I enlisted in the military, which I accredit to truly saving my life. After I enlisted, I re-enrolled in college. I graduated with a degree in biomedical science. And from there, I went on to build from the ground up the substance abuse prevention program for the Minnesota National Guard to serve the entire state. I was then asked to lead the substance abuse and suicide prevention programs across a 7-state region for the military. I've deployed twice. I just got back from my second deployment overseas where I conducted strategic planning across 13 different countries in the Middle East. And oh, by the way, I'm openly transgender, serving underneath Trump's administration as an openly trans soldier, fighting in tooth and nail for equity for trans rights while my president keeps trying to kick me out of the military. After I returned home from deployment in July, I was hired by Minnesota State Colleges and Universities as their project director for diversity, equity, and inclusion for all 54 campuses across the state. So I went from going through all of those things at a pretty young age to accomplishing all of this. So the issues that we talk about as a city are not talking points for me. These issues are extremely real because I have faced them. And I'm running right now because I think that our city is truly failing its residents. And I don't say that lightly. I really believe that. We've all heard some of the issues that we're facing, year after year property tax increases, unprecedented levels of violence, our city services are declining, and yet nobody in our city government seems to have a plan. And right now we need leadership. We need true leadership, and we need leaders, but not only just leaders, leaders that actually listen. And I've dedicated my life to service, and I have, and I always will stand up for the people and the causes that I represent because that's what leadership is. Thank you.
Thank you, Terrence. Patty.
All right, I'm going to remain seated as long as everybody can hear me. Sometimes I can project better standing, but if people can hear me, I'll remain seated. But hi, I'm Patty Hartman, and I am running for city council. And a year ago, I wouldn't have believed that this was going to be happening. But in the last year, I've had the opportunity to get to meet a lot of people in this city and find out a lot of stories about what people have encountered when they try to deal with our local government. And this has impelled me to this point. And I would like to serve you. I really think the St. Paul City is a great place. I think we've got great resources, and one of our great resources is our people. We've got good schools, we've got thoughtful, caring neighbors, and I'm always pleased at how many people I see and find around our community that are great volunteers, and that's certainly been true on my campaign. I have a campaign coalition of all volunteers, and they are some of the most dedicated, intelligent, hardworking, practical people I've ever had the privilege of working with. And I really have to say a big thank you to them, because whatever success we've had so far or will have is really due to this amazing group of people right here in St. Paul. But I'm engaged in this process because I also see a lot of issues that I found jaw-dropping, stunning. The lack of candor, the lack of transparency is the word we're choosing so often. But I can tell you that as an attorney, when we have relationships with clients, the law says we owe them complete candor. You can't have a true attorney-client relationship without having to be absolutely honest in all issues, in all regards. Otherwise, you aren't really getting informed consent to the decision-making that's going on in a very vital way. And that really troubles me about the city. It isn't just the withholding of information that's very important to the decision-making processes that the people should have a right to engage in. It really turns out, I think, in a lot of cases to be misrepresentation and misinformation. And I find that more than troubling. And that is something that really has to stop. That is one of my main priorities here, is to bring back the transparency and the accountability.
Okay, thank you. And nice lead into my favorite question, but I'm going to change it slightly. What specific things would you propose to improve transparency in the city, of the city? Starting with the city council and with city government in general. And we'll start with you, Patty.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed in watching the city council's meetings and then some of the other community meetings that take place is that the information that the people need is, if it's ever being given out, it's being given out at the last minute. And I know somebody else tonight brought that up, but I'm struck by how much the technology exists today that this, these 300-page series of documents that are being handed out for the Ford site, the AUAR, or any other set of documents, the information about the city's budget. This should all be made available well in advance of any kind of community meeting. This shouldn't be something that's withheld until people get there, or even withheld until just the day before. People should have a good 30 days if it's possible, and I think in many instances it is, but the city doesn't seem to want the people to have the information. And I simply find that troubling. And then it gets down to how the meetings are conducted themselves. And there's been much that's been pointed out recently, but it is stunning how little interaction the city will allow the people to have with whoever the representatives of the city are. It's always, if you have a question, you should write it out on paper and put it in a box. Who knows if they're even read? But it's also, the thing that's become painfully obvious is, part of the reason is the city's already made up its mind. And most of these meetings are nothing more than a piece of theater, a true farce. There's some requirement that they're supposed to have some citizen engagement. The third city hall meeting where they're looking at an ordinance that they're passing, there's supposed to be a time for citizen comment. And the citizens can comment by putting comments online or emails or letters. And this book here, which Heather referred to as evidence, yes, I downloaded this when I was working on the trash, and I couldn't believe it. These are the comments, and you could barely fit them in a 3-inch thick binder. There are thousands of comments in there that were submitted to the city by July of 2017. Now that was several months before they passed the ordinance. And this was the citizen engagement time. And I can tell you easily 90% of these comments from the citizens are against the organized trash plan. And so when I downloaded it, and some of the letters were suggestions that were quite intelligent. But the city goes forward anyway. Clearly it was a done deal.
Thank you. Terrence.
So My motto is T is for transparency, and that's been the buzzword tonight. I can hear it through across the campaigns, but it's real, again, these aren't talking points to me, this is very real. And I chose T is for transparency for a reason, because there is an inherent lack of that in our government. And at the city level, that should not be the case. It can be a dumpster fire at the national level, that's fine. But at the city level, it is small enough where you can engage in the processes, but we are being deliberately shut out of the processes. And Patty hit on this. But when our city comes up with plans, they open them up for public input. And by the time that they do that, they're already 4, 5, or 6 steps into the process, or decisions have already been made. And oftentimes, the meetings are scripted. And by scripted, I mean they will filter the questions that they answered to go along with the agenda that they have. And this is not acceptable, but this is how our city is running. So I think that is one of the easiest things that we can do, is to actually have the authentic community engagement, opening up the processes earlier, leveraging technology and how we engage with our communities, because we continue to only hear from a certain portion of our communities because we don't have an accessible government for people that are almost always left out of the conversation. There's a significant swath of our marginalized communities that never get a chance to participate because they can't show up in person, because it's not accessible, because they don't have childcare, because they work multiple jobs. But we don't make it accessible for them to be able to participate in the process, and so the same voices keep getting heard over and over again. Not only that, but we've got a top-down approach to governance. At a city level, again, not acceptable. It should be bottom-up. There's no reason why we can't, because it's small enough for us to be able to do that. And again, with regard to transparency, this is a one-party town. You know, I mean, and that's unfortunate because we have a lot of divisiveness in politics. And I asked the DFL to hold off on endorsement while I was deployed. They didn't. They held a closed-door meeting, and they didn't even bring up my request. And the only reason I found out about that was because somebody that I know was in that closed-door meeting. So what kind of transparency do we have if that's the way our St. Paul DFL is operating in this city? Just food for thought.
Thank you, Terrence. So we spent a lot of time talking about property taxes going up. I paid mine a couple of days ago, and it was like, yeah, they really are going up. Be creative for us. What are ways you can think of to increase city revenues so that we really don't have to continually rely on the property tax? And there'll be a follow-up question that deals with cuts. So, and I think you get to go first. Yeah, you do.
So what's really interesting about our city budget, we are getting asked as citizens to keep year after year tax increases. And most people don't mind paying taxes. We know that we need taxes to fund our city. We need taxes for our schools, we need taxes for our school, we need taxes for our police, our infrastructure, and the list goes on. But most people don't know that our city doesn't have city audits anymore. So the last audit that was done was in fiscal year 2017, so our city is asking for us to keep contributing to their honeypot, and then we can't even hold them accountable on what the heck they're spending their money on. So I know that that doesn't speak to how we increase revenues, but I think that that's all something that everybody needs to know and ask the question, why don't we have city audits anymore? If you're asking this from us and we're the ones that are funding our city, well, then we need to have a way to be able to hold you accountable. There are a lot of other ways that we could be saving money. How about not getting sued year after year after year? And that all goes back to planning. As somebody that just got done doing strategic planning, like I said, in the Middle East, what I notice our city has is a lack of a plan. We have this 273-page 2040 plan, and if you haven't read it, that's fine, because you wouldn't be missing much. Because it's a plan with a lack of a plan. And you could take that plan and you could transplant it onto any major metropolitan city across the country, and it says just about the same dang thing. But there are no measures of performance, there are no measures of effectiveness, there are no action plans, there's nobody that is designated to be held responsible for carrying forth that plan. So we, when we talk about how we're gonna, how our city budgets and things like that, well, again, we aren't even doing our due diligence as a government because we're not even functioning the way that we need to function. We don't have plans, we don't have audits. There's a variety of things that we need to get back to basics on before we can move forward.
Okay, Patty, it's your turn.
Okay, and if I remember the,
Be creative about how you could increase revenues to the city without raising taxes.
I would say getting back to the basics would really help, even though we know we've got a huge deficit for what it's going to cost to fix our streets. One of the problems we have is we could generate more revenues from economic development, enterprise businesses. I've been a small business owner for 35 years, self-employed as an attorney. There are some challenges when you are self-employed and you have a business, but there are also some great, wonderful rewards. And I think it's one of those aspects to life that so many people dream of, and I think it's a way people get a foothold, and it's also a way that a community gets richer because of the small businesses that people feel that they can start, and they know they're giving to the community in so many ways. And St. Paul is really lacking in business. We've watched the downtown area hollow out. All of the businesses leave. And I've been told that's one of the big differences between St. Paul and Minneapolis. Minneapolis actually generates money that supports the rest of the city in terms of tax revenue. St. Paul is a negative. And it's also a sad place for a person to start a business because of the not sad state of the streets, but also all the issues with the homeless and what are in the streets, people who need social services, mental health. We have so many issues. But I think the city does not take care of the basics. They don't do the housekeeping that they used to do. And I think if we could get back to that and become a climate that is, again, more friendly to small businesses, I think we'd generate a lot more money.
Thank you. As you've kind of, I'm going to make an assumption here. In your case, something like this is, it's a safe assumption. As you've immersed yourself in learning how the city currently does business, what are some things that come to your mind that you would change to make the city more responsive to its citizens? And you get to start.
I think there should be some pretty strict rules on how these meetings are going to be held so that we can have real public discourse so that citizens can hear each other out in the open. I think that I really believe in group thought. I think that you can get a much better work product from a group of people. I think there's a reason for 2 heads are better than 1, as long as they're not on the same person, right? That's the saying. But it's generally true. And I think that the city is so obsessed with maintaining control over the people that they really don't want people to have the free flow of communication with each other. I think that threatens the power of the city, and that's sad. A really good governance is like a good parent. You would work yourself out of a job. You would give power over to those people that you think you're in charge of. And I think we have the reverse here in the city. I think they are feeding and preying off of their own people. And I think one of the ingredients there is that it's very obsessive about controlling the communications and trying very hard to make sure that what various citizens are thinking isn't shared out on the public waves. So I think we would open up the meetings. I think we do need to improve the city website. It's very difficult to find things there if they're there at all. You'd practically have to call somebody up and see if you could find it. It's archaic. But I think the communication would be a big thing so that people can get the information. I guess it gets back to transparency.
Okay. Terrence?
Sure. Accountability. And that is one of the number one things I think we need to have. So change to make the city more responsive to the residents is through accountability. Part of the reason I have been so successful in my career in the military is because of the type of leadership that I exude, the way that I lead, and I don't see that with a lot of our current city leaders. And you need to listen to the people that you serve. Some of the best laid plans that I have ever come up with have been from the ground up because I take the inputs and the feedback from the people that I am serving with and or serving over. You know, and we don't have that happening right now. And that's why when you go around and you talk to people, so many people are saying, no one is listening. Well, there's a reason why people are saying that no one is listening. It's either it's not accessible to them, or if you are telling our city leadership something, their responses are disingenuous, or they just completely glaze over, and it's like, thank you for your comments, on to the next one. And again, because this is at a local level, we need to do business much, much differently, and we have the opportunity to do that, but we need true leaders to be able to bring that forward in our city and that aren't self-serving. The second thing is I would also like to see power built back into our district councils. And I know that, Mayor Coleman was he wasn't a big fan of them, so he kind of stripped away a lot of the power and some of the funding and the support for our district councils, but our district councils need to be supported more because that is the heartbeat of our neighborhoods. And each little district that we have within our wards has its own character, and they're all unique, and they are really the bread and butter and have the finger on the pulse of everything that's happening within our respective districts. And I would like to see those be supported more and to be that first line of defense, so to speak, between our residents and the city so that they can be more engaged within the processes that we have.
Thank you. Something different. This is a yes/no question. Do you, and this one is because you got this in the ward in which you live, do you think the Ford site's going to be developed if we don't give them TIF money to the developers?
Did you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay. I think the Ford site would be developed with or without TIF money. As everybody knows, it's a beautiful piece of property. It's a gem. It would be the holy grail sought after by so many developers in the Midwest, maybe in the whole country. And if the rule on TIF money is the but-for test, we sure flunked it there, didn't we?
Okay, Terrence, what do you think?
I agree. That is the most prime piece of real estate in St. Paul, and there's no reason that we needed to give a significant subsidy to developers to come in and develop there. Right now, we funnel away $33 million a year to developers for TIF. And for the Ford site is anywhere between 107 up to $275 million for TIF.
Okay, we'll start with Terrence. What do you think the most pressing issues are in Ward 4? Pick your top three.
For Ward 4 specifically, the majority of what I hear from people is the trash. Whether people are for it or against it, most people are just really pissed off with how this happened, and I don't blame them. The trash, the year after year tax increases, and the lack of transparency, the lack of being heard. Those are the three things that I keep hearing over and over again in our ward.
Okay. How about Ward 3?
Well, the Ford site obviously is huge because of what it represents and all of the different issues that it entails. It's going to have a huge impact on the environment. And we're always talking about sustainability. And I think one of the things that the people who are really caring about are looking at what are you going to build and how sustainable is it going to be and what kind of an impact is it going to have on everybody who's there and for how many years. We're looking towards the future, and we want to make sure that there's a wise development of that land and that we don't overburden the land mass with too much need for transportation that we can't build in or we can't support. We're already suffering from streets that are not navigable, not just because of the condition of the streets, but because of how narrow they are and how many cars and how many trips. And there's a lot of concern about once they go digging into the Ford site, the contamination that's already in the ground and all of the issues about the safety of what's going to happen with the contamination so close to the Mississippi River, such a beautiful natural resource, and the wildlife and how that could be disturbed if it's overdeveloped, and the need to retain the green space and the community spaces that really give people such a much more livable life. It needs to be looked at thoughtfully and cherished as the community asset that it is.
Okay. So quick route, that was one. What are your other two top issues for Ward 3?
Well, I think the streets are another, because they're so basic. And if you don't have navigable streets, you really have safety issues there. I know that public safety is very important to people in the Ward 3. Fortunately for us, we haven't had to have the shootings, which are every day in our city. But we do know we have increased crime. And so it's a sense of a lack of safety and sort of a feeling of being invaded when you have that kind of crime.
Okay. Now here's what I think of as the softball.
Wait, do I get to answer the last two?
Pardon me?
The other two issues for Ward 4 that I hear about?
I thought you gave them to us.
No.
Oh.
But they are our infrastructure, similarly to what Patty said, and then housing and affordable housing in particular. And that's something, again, that people are a lot of buzzwords around affordable housing and what does that actually mean. And Liz spoke to this when she was up here. I don't see her here anymore. But how do you change a system if you don't understand the nuances? And as somebody that has experienced homelessness and housing discrimination, frankly, after I got back from my first deployment overseas, you know, here I am, a combat Bronze Star veteran, coming back from Afghanistan. I was denied housing because I had something on my criminal record from 10 years prior. Yep. You know, so these, like I said before, these issues, I know how to navigate them because I've lived them, and they're not talking points for me. So affordable housing would be the other one.
Okay. And you get to start on this one. It's the great hope of many people, and I think many people in this room, that we'll get to do a do-over on the garbage thing. What would you propose as the way to deal with garbage?
Personally, I am a supporter of having organized trash, municipal-run trash, but I do not support what the city did. They locked us into a terrible contract with, you know, it's not flexible whatsoever. I want us to have cart sharing options. I want us to work to expedite composting and having opting out. Those are three things that you see across the majority of municipal services across the country. So those would be the three things I would like to have included into our trash.
All right. Well, I'd like to do the do-over and have real citizen engagement. And I'd really like to get the word out to all the citizens and let them know we're looking at organized trash again. What's your idea for how it should be run? And this time, you know, do a direct mailing to everybody in the city and let them know how they can get their thoughts, their words into the plan, and start to formulate some idea of how many people are going to support it, how many people are against it, what are the features. I know from all of the communication that I've been involved with for the last year, there is support for a city-run trash plan, but we absolutely have to support the right for people to opt out and to share and to keep the costs down. I also have heard of many suggestions for how we could keep a single truck on a block and still keep numerous haulers. This doesn't mean you have to have just one hauler for the whole city. There are creative ways of dividing up the city into grids and allowing different haulers and keeping our local haulers involved to have some kind of a bidding process for a particular grid. But I would welcome any suggestions from the people, and I think there should be a really serious outreach. Let people know through a direct mailing, let people send some comments into a mailbox that somebody will actually go through and publish, and then start to define some different ideas and let people have another vote on it. Let it be a process of engagement, and possibly start out with a pilot program on just one section of the city before they try to roll it out. Most of the plans like this where we've seen major shifts that I've been involved with as an attorney, they don't force it across the board for everybody. When we switch to electronic filing, for example, we don't file lawsuits anymore as paper at the clerk of court's office. We submit them electronically and upload them to a website. Well, we didn't do this in every county all at the same time. You know, other governmental entities understand the wisdom of doing a little bit of a testing. Sometimes it's voluntary at the beginning, sometimes it's a limited area, but it allows them to tweak it before they start to roll it out and get more feedback. And it's just a much more intelligent process. It involves more people, it's a little bit longer.
Last question before we go to closing statements. Almost all the thoughtful commentators talk about part of what's plaguing our politics these days is the infusion of large amounts of money. And I see discussions that we may have city council races in St. Paul cost upwards of $100,000. Tell me in nice, concise terms, what's your reaction to that reality? I think, Terrence, you get to go first. So,
You did this on purpose, didn't you? No, I'm just kidding.
everything is on purpose.
No. Yes, there is, in my opinion, far too much money being injected into local politics. I have a goal of running my campaign on about $20,000. And that's what it's going to cost for me to get all the signs, the literature, all of that stuff for my campaign. It's strictly for marketing and it's for outreach. The incumbent right now over the course of the last 13 months has raised $140,000. And I know during one of the forums they talked about how they pay their staff a living wage and they pay their volunteers. And I personally don't believe it should cost that much money to run a city council race, and only 30% of those donations came from even people that live within inside our ward. So what does that tell you? Whose interests, again, do we have in mind, and why is there that much money being injected into a local race? I mean, that's a significant amount of money for a city council race. And if I can do this on $20,000 and still outreach to renters or people that have been traditionally left out of the conversation, why can't you?
Okay, and Patty, what do you think?
Well, I think that says a lot too. That's sad that 6 figures is being spent on a city council race, because we all know there are a lot of good, very qualified people who aren't going to have access to that kind of money. And another thing I'll tell you as an attorney, when I would go shopping with my clients' money and have to hire experts, I noticed that a lot of times the best expert isn't the one that gets paid the most or charges the highest amount of money. There's no hard and fast rule on that. You can, sometimes some good experts have very expensive price tags, but you have to use your judgment and your instinct, and money isn't everything. And sometimes the person that's willing to come into the courtroom, who's going to have the most persuasive and most intelligent opinion, is somebody who works as a teacher at a local college, and they're going to do this for a few $100s. The fancy expert that's got the $800 an hour price tag, a lot of times is worthless. And that's just something that I keep in mind when I go shopping. For anything, you have to look at the value you're getting and what you're really buying. I am wondering about these races where people pour $140,000 into them. Why do they need to spend that kind of money?
Thank you. You get 2 minutes to close, and I think, Terrence, you get to start.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'll
we're
say-
getting short on time, so please.
Sure, I'll make it quick. Again, thank you so much for being here tonight. This really is humbling, and it's not easy to come here and to do this over and over again. I work full time, and I come home, and we hit it hard each and every single night of the week because we have to. And I don't do this because I have self-interests in mind. And nobody, I look at this as how I serve in the military. Nobody joins the military to be self-serving. And when I say, if you did, you all would probably be suffering with me right now, but you're not. It truly is about selfless service for me and leadership. And right now we have such a lack of true leaders in our city that are willing to take responsibility for their actions, and that's what leaders do. If you screw up, admit that you screw up. listen to the people that you represent. It's not complicated. None of this should be that complicated. You know, and we are all feeling the way that we're feeling for a reason. And you can see it in the fact that there are 28 people running for city council, a record number of people running. People are ticked off right now, you know, but yet I am extremely hopeful for the future of our city. I love this city, and my wife and I are young homeowners. My mother-in-law lives with us, and we have 3 generations underneath one roof, and I want to believe that we can have a city that will represent all of us in the future, and a city that our future generations can truly be proud of. But we do need to make a change, because that is not the path that we're on right now.
And thank you. Patty?
Thank you.
Well, what can I say? We've got a current city government that's clearly out of touch and clearly non-responsive. The incumbent for Ward 3 doesn't even show up tonight, doesn't even give a response. And that was one of the criticisms that I heard from so many people all over the ward. You don't get a phone call returned. You don't get to have any communication with that person. You don't really know what's going on. And it's visibly on display here tonight. And I would like to change that. I'm not only here tonight, I'll be there for you in the future. I'll make myself available. I'll be out in the community. You won't have to come downtown St. Paul to find me. And if you don't know, the current office holder really has a regular full-time job in Minneapolis. I'm not sure if the city council is just a part-time gig or what it is, if it's even, doesn't even seem to be part-time for that person. But I would make this a serious full-time endeavor. I want to know what people think. I want to be able to be your voice. I want to be able to have people engage with each other and get to know not just me, but other people in the community. There's so many great people out there. And sometimes I take joy in knowing that I could introduce one person to another person. This is how you really create a good culture. And I'd love to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you.